a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Bette Davis. Ruth Elizabeth, Bette Davis was an American actress of film, television, and theater. With a career spanning 60 years, she is regarded as one of the greatest actresses in Hollywood history. She was noted for playing unsympathetic, sardonic characters, and was famous for her performances in a range of film genres, from contemporary crime melodramas to historical and period films, suspense horror, and occasional comedies, although her greatest successes were her roles in romantic dramas. After appearing in Broadway plays, Davis moved to Hollywood in the summer of 1930. However, her early films for Universal Studios were unsuccessful. She joined Warner Brothers in 1932 and established her career with several critically acclaimed performances. In 1937, she attempted to free herself from her contract. Although she lost the well-publicized legal case against the studio, it marked the beginning of the most successful period of her career. Until the late 1940s, she was one of American cinema's most celebrated leading ladies. Known for her forceful and intense style, Davis gained a reputation as a perfectionist who could be highly combative and confrontational. She clashed with studio executives and film directors, as well as many of her co-stars. Her forthright manner, idiosyncratic speech, and ubiquitous cigarette contributed to a public persona, which has often been imitated. Davis was the co-founder of the Hollywood Canteen and was the first female president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. She won the Academy Award for Best Actress twice, was the first person to accrue 10 Academy Award nominations for acting, and was the first woman to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Film Institute. Her career went through several periods of eclipse, and she admitted that her success had often been at the expense of her personal relationships. Married 4 times, she was once widowed and 3 times divorced, and raised her children as a single parent. Her final years were marred by a long period of ill health, but she continued acting until shortly before her death from breast cancer, with more than 100 film, television, and theater roles to her credit during her 6-decade-long career. In 1999, Davis was placed second behind Katharine Hepburn on the American Film Institute's list of the greatest female stars of classic Hollywood cinema. 1908-1929, Childhood and Early Acting Career. Ruth Elizabeth Davis, known from early childhood as Bette, was born on April 5, 1908, in Lowell, Massachusetts, the daughter of Harlow Morrell Davis, a law student from Augusta, Maine, and subsequently a patent attorney, and Ruth Augusta, from Tingsboro, Massachusetts. Bette's younger sister was Barbara Harriet. In 1915, Davis's parents separated, and Bette attended a Spartan boarding school called Crest Halburn in Lanesboro in the Berkshires. In 1921, Ruth Davis moved to New York City with her daughters, where she worked as a portrait photographer. Bette later changed the spelling of her name to Betty, after Honoré de Balzac's La Cousine Bette. During their time in New York, Davis became a Girl Scout who proved so successful she later ranked as a patrol leader. Davis attended Cushing Academy, a boarding school in Ashburnham, Massachusetts, where she met her future husband, Harmon O. Nelson, known as Ham, in 1926. A then 18-year-old Davis saw a production of Henrik Ibsen's The Wild Duck with Blanche Yerker and Peg Entwistle. Davis later recalled for Al Cohen of Newsday, "The reason I wanted to go into theatre was because of an actress named Peg Entwistle. She auditioned for admission to Eva Le Gallienne Manhattan Civic Repertory, but was rejected by Le Gallienne, who described her attitude as insincere and frivolous." Davis auditioned for George Cukor's Stock Theatre Company in Rochester, New York. Although he was not very impressed, he gave Davis her first paid acting assignment, a 1-week stint playing the part of a chorus girl in the play Broadway. Ed Seekov sources Davis's first professional role to a 1929 production by the Provincetown Players of Virgil Geddes' play The Earth Between. However, the production was postponed by a year. In 1929, Davis was chosen by Blanche Yerker to play Hedwig, the character she had seen Entwistle play in The Wild Duck. After performing in Philadelphia, Washington, and Boston, she made her Broadway debut in 1929 in Broken Dishes, and followed it with Solid South. 1930-1936, Early Years in Hollywood. In 1930, 22-year-old Davis moved to Hollywood to screen test for Universal Studios. Davis and her mother traveled by train to Hollywood. She later recounted her surprise that nobody from the studio was there to meet her. In fact, a studio employee had waited for her, but left because he saw nobody who looked like an actress. She failed her first screen test, but was used in several screen tests for other actors. In a 1971 interview with Dick Cavett, she related the experience with the observation, "I was the most Yankee-est, most modest virgin who ever walked the earth. They laid me on a couch, and I tested 15 men. They all had to lie on top of me and give me a passionate kiss. Oh, I thought I would die. Just thought I would die." A second test was arranged for Davis, for the 1931 film A House Divided. Hastily dressed in an ill-fitting costume with a low neckline, she was rebuffed by the film director William Wyler, who loudly commented to the assembled crew, "What do you think of these dames who show their chests and think they can get jobs?" Carl Laemmle, the head of Universal Studios, considered terminating Davis's employment, but cinematographer Carl Freund told him she had lovely eyes and would be suitable for Bad Sister, in which she subsequently made her film debut. Her nervousness was compounded when she overheard the chief of production, Carl Laemmle Jr., comment to another executive that she had about as much sex appeal as Slim Somerville, one of the film's co-stars. The film was not a success, and her next role in Seed was too brief to attract attention. Universal Studios renewed her contract for 3 months, and she appeared in a small role in Waterloo Bridge, before being lent to Columbia Pictures for The Menace, and to Capitol Films for Hell's House. After 1 year and 6 unsuccessful films, Laemmle elected not to renew her contract. Davis was preparing to return to New York when actor George Arliss chose Davis for the lead female role in the Warner Brothers picture The Man Who Played God, and for the rest of her life, Davis credited him with helping her achieve her break in Hollywood. The Saturday Evening Post wrote, "She is not only beautiful, but she bubbles with charm," and compared her to Constance Bennett and Olive Borden. Warner Brothers signed her to a 5-year contract, and she remained with the studio for the next 18 years. Davis married Harmon Oscar Nelson on August 18, 1932, in Yuma, Arizona. Their marriage was scrutinized by the press. His $100 a week earnings compared unfavorably with Davis's reported $1,000 a week income. Davis addressed the issue in an interview, pointing out that many Hollywood wives earned more than their husbands, but the situation proved difficult for Nelson, who refused to allow Davis to purchase a house until he could afford to pay for it himself. Davis had several abortions during the marriage. After more than 20 film roles, the role of the vicious and slatternly Mildred Rogers in the RKO radio production of Human Bondage, a film adaptation of W. Somerset Maugham's novel, earned Davis her first major critical acclaim. Many actresses feared playing unsympathetic characters, and several had refused the role, but Davis viewed it as an opportunity to show the range of her acting skills. Her co-star, Leslie Howard, was initially dismissive of her, but as filming progressed, his attitude changed, and he subsequently spoke highly of her abilities. The director John Cromwell allowed her relative freedom. "I let Bette have her head. I trusted her instincts. She insisted that she be portrayed realistically in her death scene, and said, 'The last stages of consumption, poverty, and neglect are not pretty,' and I intended to be convincing looking." The film was a success, and Davis's characterization won praise from critics, with Life writing that she gave probably the best performance ever recorded on the screen by a U.S. actress. Davis anticipated that her reception would encourage Warner Brothers to cast her in more important roles, and was disappointed when Jack L. Warner refused to lend her to Columbia Studios to appear in It Happened One Night, and instead cast her in the melodrama Housewife. When Davis was not nominated for an Academy Award for Of Human Bondage, the Hollywood Citizen News questioned the omission, and Norma Shearer, herself a nominee, joined a campaign to have Davis nominated. This prompted an announcement from the Academy president, Howard Estabrook, who said that under the circumstances, any voter may write on the ballot his or her personal choice for the winners, thus allowing, for the only time in the Academy's history, the consideration of a candidate not officially nominated for an award. The uproar led, however, to a change in Academy voting procedures the following year, wherein nominations were determined by votes from all eligible members of a particular branch, rather than by a smaller committee, with results independently tabulated by the accounting firm Pricewaterhouse. Davis appeared in Dangerous as a troubled actress, and received very good reviews. Arnett Robertson wrote in Picture Post, "I think Bette Davis would probably have been burned as a witch if she had lived 200 or 300 years ago." She gives the curious feeling of being charged with power which can find no ordinary outlet. The New York Times hailed her as becoming one of the most interesting of our screen actresses. She won the Academy Award for Best Actress for the role, but commented that it was belated recognition for Of Human Bondage, calling the award a consolation prize for the rest of her life. Davis maintained that she gave the statue its familiar name of Oscar because its posterior resembled that of her husband, whose middle name was Oscar, although the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences officially makes reference to another story. In her next film, The Petrified Forest, Davis co-starred with Leslie Howard and Humphrey Bogart. Legal case. Convinced that her career was being damaged by a succession of mediocre films, Davis accepted an offer in 1936 to appear in 2 films in Britain. Knowing that she was breaching her contract with Warner Brothers, she fled to Canada to avoid legal papers being served on her. Eventually, Davis brought her case to court in Britain, hoping to get out of her contract. She later recalled the opening statement of the barrister. Patrick Hastings, who represented Warner Brothers. Hastings urged the court to come to the conclusion that this is rather a naughty young lady, and that what she wants is more money. He mocked Davis's description of her contract as slavery, by stating, incorrectly, that she was being paid $1,350 per week. He remarked, "If anybody wants to put me into perpetual servitude on the basis of that remuneration, I shall prepare to consider it." The British press offered little support to Davis, and portrayed her as overpaid and ungrateful. Davis explained her viewpoint to a journalist, "I knew that, if I continued to appear in any more mediocre pictures, I would have no career left worth fighting for." Her counsel presented the complaints that she could be suspended without pay for refusing a part, with a period of suspension added to her contract, that she could be called upon to play any part within her abilities. regardless of her personal beliefs, that she could be required to support a political party against her beliefs, and that her image and likeness could be displayed in any manner deemed applicable by the studio. Jack Warner testified, and was asked, "Whatever part you choose to call upon her to play, if she thinks she can play it, whether it is distasteful and cheap, she has to play it." Warner replied, "Yes, she must play it." Davis lost the case, and returned to Hollywood, in debt and without income, to resume her career. Olivia de Havilland mounted a similar case in 1943, and won. 1937-1941, success with Warner Brothers. Davis began work on Marked Woman, portraying a prostitute in a contemporary gangster drama inspired by the case of Lucky Luciano. For her performance in the film, she was awarded the Volpe Cup at the 1937 Venice Film Festival. Her next picture was Jezebel, and during production, Davis entered a relationship with director William Wyler. She later described him as the love of my life, and said that making the film with him was the time in my life of my most perfect happiness. The film was a success, and Davis's performance as a spoiled Southern belle earned her a second Academy Award. This led to speculation in the press that she would be chosen to play Scarlett O'Hara, a similar character, in Gone with the Wind. Davis expressed her desire to play Scarlett, and while David O. Selznick was conducting a search for the actress to play the role, a radio poll named her as the audience favorite. Warner offered her services to Selznick as part of a deal that also included Errol Flynn and Olivia de Havilland, but Selznick did not consider Davis as suitable, and rejected the offer. While Davis did not want Flynn cast as Rhett Butler, newcomer Vivien Leigh was cast as Scarlett O'Hara. De Havilland landed a role as Melanie, and both of them were nominated for the Oscars, with Leigh's winning. Jezebel marked the beginning of the most successful phase of Davis's career, and over the next few years, she was listed in the annual Quigley poll of the top 10 money-making stars, which was compiled from the votes of movie exhibitors throughout the U.S. for the stars who had generated the most revenue in their theaters over the previous year. In contrast to Davis's success, her husband, Ham Nelson, had failed to establish a career for himself, and their relationship faltered. In 1938, Nelson obtained evidence that Davis was engaged in a sexual relationship with Howard Hughes, and subsequently filed for divorce. Citing Davis's cruel and inhuman manner, Davis was emotional during the making of her next film, Dark Victory, and considered abandoning it until the producer Hal B. Wallace convinced her to channel her despair into her acting. The film became one of the highest-grossing films of the year, and the role of Judith Traherne brought her an Academy Award nomination. In later years, Davis cited this performance as her personal favorite. She appeared in 3 other box office hits in 1939, The Old Maid with Miriam Hopkins, Juarez with Paul Muni, and The Private Lives of Elizabeth and Essex with Errol Flynn. The last was her first color film, and her only color film made during the height of her career. To play the elderly Elizabeth I of England, Davis shaved her hairline and eyebrows. During filming, she was visited on the set by the actor Charles Laughton. She commented that she had a nerve playing a woman in her 60s, to which Laughton replied, "Never not dare to hang yourself. That's the only way you grow in your profession. You must continually attempt things that you think are beyond you, or you get into a complete rut." Recalling the episode many years later, Davis remarked that Laughton's advice had influenced her throughout her career. By this time, Davis was Warner Brothers' most profitable star, and she was given the most important of their female leading roles. Her image was considered with more care. Although she continued to play character roles, she was often filmed in close-ups that emphasized her distinctive eyes. All this and Heaven 2 was the most financially successful film of Davis's career to that point. The letter was considered one of the best pictures of the year by The Hollywood Reporter, and Davis won admiration for her portrayal of an adulterous killer, a role originated by Katharine Cornell. During this time, she was in a relationship with her former co-star George Brent, who proposed marriage. Davis refused, as she had met Arthur Farnsworth, a New England innkeeper. Davis and Farnsworth were married at Home Ranch, in Rimrock, Arizona, in December 1940. In January 1941, Davis became the first female president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, but antagonized the committee members with her brash manner and radical proposals. Davis rejected the idea of her being just a figurehead only. Faced with the disapproval and resistance of the committee, Davis resigned, and was succeeded by her predecessor Walter Wanger. Davis starred in 3 movies in 1941, the first being The Great Lie, with George Brent. It was a refreshingly different role for Davis, as she played a kind, sympathetic character. William Wyler directed Davis for the 3rd time in Lillian Hellman's The Little Foxes, but they clashed over the character of Regina Giddens, a role originally played on Broadway by Tallulah Bankhead. Wyler encouraged Davis to emulate Bankhead's interpretation of the role, but Davis wanted to make the role her own. She received another Academy Award nomination for her performance, and never worked with Wyler again. 1942, 1944, War Effort and Personal Tragedy. Following the attack on Pearl Harbor, Davis spent the early months of 1942 selling war bonds. After Jack Warner criticized her tendency to cajole crowds into buying, she reminded him that her audiences responded most strongly to her bitch performances. She sold $2 million worth of bonds in 2 days, as well as a picture of herself in Jezebel for $250,000. She also performed for black regiments as the only white member of an acting troupe formed by Hattie McDaniel, which included Lena Horne and Ethel Waters. At John Garfield's suggestion of opening a servicemen's club in Hollywood, Davis, with the aid of Warner, Cary Grant, and Jules Stein, transformed an old nightclub into the Hollywood Canteen, which opened on October 3, 1942. Hollywood's most important stars volunteered to entertain servicemen. Davis ensured that every night, a few important names would be there for the visiting soldiers to meet. She appeared as herself in the film Hollywood Canteen, which used the canteen as the setting for a fictional story. Davis later commented, "There are few accomplishments in my life that I am sincerely proud of. The Hollywood Canteen is one of them." In 1980, she was awarded the Distinguished Civilian Service Medal, the United States Department of Defense's highest civilian award, for her work with the Hollywood Canteen. Davis showed little interest in the film Now, Voyager, until Hal Wallace advised her that female audiences needed romantic dramas to distract them from the reality of their lives. It became one of the best-known of her women's pictures. In one of the film's most imitated scenes, Paul Henry lights 2 cigarettes as he stares into Davis's eyes, and passes one to her. Film reviewers complimented Davis on her performance, the National Board of Review commenting that she gave the film a dignity not fully warranted by the script. During the early 1940s, several of Davis's film choices were influenced by the war, such as Watch on the Rhine, by Lillian Hellman, and Thank Your Lucky Stars, a light-hearted all-star musical cavalcade, with each of the featured stars donating their fees to the Hollywood Canteen. Davis performed a novelty song, They're Either Too Young or Too Old, which became a hit record after the film's release. Old acquaintance reunited her with Miriam Hopkins in a story of 2 old friends who deal with the tensions created when one of them becomes a successful novelist. Davis felt that Hopkins tried to upstage her throughout the film. Director Vincent Sherman recalled the intense competition and animosity between the 2 actresses, and Davis often joked that she held back nothing in a scene in which she was required to shake Hopkins in a fit of anger. In August 1943, Davis's husband, Arthur Farnsworth, collapsed while walking along a Hollywood street, and died 2 days later. An autopsy revealed that his fall had been caused by a skull fracture he had suffered 2 weeks earlier. Davis testified before an inquest that she knew of no event that might have caused the injury. a finding of accidental death was reached. Highly distraught, Davis attempted to withdraw from her next film Mr. Skeffington. But Jack Warner, who had halted production following Farnsworth's death, convinced her to continue. Although she had gained a reputation for being forthright and demanding, her behavior during filming of Mr. Skeffington was erratic and out of character. She alienated Vincent Sherman by refusing to film certain scenes and insisting that some sets be rebuilt. She improvised dialogue, causing confusion among other actors, and infuriated the writer, Julius Epstein, who was called upon to rewrite scenes at her whim. Davis later explained her actions with the observation, "When I was most unhappy, I lashed out, rather than whined." Some reviewers criticized Davis for the excess of her performance. James Agee wrote that she demonstrates the horrors of egocentricity on a marathonic scale. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?